It's time for ROTD Weekend. I may not have a sweet tooth, but this show is not for me. It is for you. And so I have done two things for this episode to help a bit with your dessert planning for this holiday season. I will tell you about the second thing that I'm doing first. So the second thing that I'll be doing is talking with my amazing guest today. It is my friend and always wonderful, brilliant pastry chef, Jenni Field from Pastry Chef Online. I always love talking to Jenni, and I know you love hearing from her too. So she is on sharing a dessert recipe with us and also talking about some easy dessert things that we can do for Christmas coming up. And then I'm just going to tell you about a couple of little things that I like to do around the holidays since I don't really eat a lot of desserts, but my kids do, trying to find that happy compromise. I mean, we can buy some things, of course. And then my daughter does make these like really nice jelly roll cakes. We'll probably do that. And then what else do we do? I quite often will do some kind of trifle for actual Christmas Day or for Christmas Eve. It might not seem like exactly the right thing for Christmas to have like a berry trifle, but my whole family loves that. So I'll do like berries mixed with jam, like warmed up jam, layered with those ladyfinger cookies, and then layered with a mixture of half and half whipped cream and cream cheese that have been blended together. And I just do those layers and I put it in the fridge for, about 24 hours. And then it is delicious and super easy and everybody likes that. So I do that one quite often. I also am actually thinking about doing a layer of that vanilla bean custard that I told you about this week. So that recipe is up on the Cookful and it is really luscious. And I think it would be a great addition to any kind of trifle like that. And then I, of course, always make a batch of butter tarts. Those are a Canadian treat. I know I've told you about them before. Very, very classic for this time of year. So I will do some butter tarts. It's a nice little tart with, mine have raisins in them. A lot of people don't like them with raisins, but it's kind of like butterscotchy filling. They are so easy to make. I love that recipe. And then the other thing that I will do is I get those phyllo tart shells. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like phyllo dough that's already been shaped into these little tartlets, and you bake them and then you let them cool and fill them. And I will fill them with a mixture of half cream cheese and half sweetened condensed milk, and then pipe it into those once they're cooled. And they kind of taste like cheesecake, but creamier, a little bit of like pomegranate seeds on top. Really, really pretty. That recipe is actually on Cook the Story, so I will link to that one for you. And then one final idea that I really love to do is to make a simple like tray of the desserts that I'm having or that I have made. So in this case, maybe it's got the butter tarts and these little cheesecake phyllo cups on it. And then I'll do a dip, like a chocolate dip, and some fruit and some like cookies. And that's kind of it, and everybody gets little things. And I haven't spent a ton of time making like a big dessert that I'm not going to enjoy making or eating, but that everybody else is going to enjoy eating for sure. So those are some of my ideas for if you want to do something sweet for the holiday season. I've also got, actually, I will just link to these for you, some like no-bake Christmas cookies on my site, The Cookful. So there are some Buckeyes, some cherry peanut butter balls. There are some Swedish no-bake chocolate balls, the chocolate bollar. Those are really, really fun and have some coffee in them. And there's another one. Oh yeah, okay, the Snickerdoodle Bites, those are really fun, and some no-bake thumbprint cookies. All really tasty, easy ideas for you. And now with some more tasty, delicious, desserty ideas, I am happy to share with you my conversation with Jenni Field from Pastry Chef Online. Here we go. Jenni Field, welcome back to the show.
I'm so glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
I love talking to you, as you know, all the time. But right now, so this episode is going live on December 14th. We are 2 weeks out or not even, from both Christmas and actually Hanukkah. So it's like big, big, big cooking time, big dessert time. And you know, and everybody listening knows, I don't have a huge sweet tooth. I don't love doing a lot of baking. And so I wanted to have you on for your phrase that I'm stealing from you to impart some of your desserty wisdom to me. What can I make that is simple, that I'm going to maybe enjoy making, doing some baking, that other people are going to love, that's not going to take me a ton of time because I don't love it so much? Do you have ideas for what I can make for this holiday season?
Like to give as gifts or just have as easy desserts or both?
I think easy desserts, probably. I don't do a lot of food gifting, but I should. But okay, we'll just stick with desserts.
Whole other. All right. One of my favorite things to make that doesn't take too long, everybody loves, and it makes a lot. So you can like split it up into little, batches or whatever and dole it out as necessary, is brownie brittle. And back when I developed this recipe, which is quite a few years ago, I thought, how do you get it to taste like a brownie, but be crispy? And my thought was, perhaps you should get rid of eggs and just use egg whites because egg whites makes things crispy.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. And then, of course, you spread it really thin and it can't help but be magically delicious. So you make a brownie batter. I have a recipe on my site, but you can use pretty much any brownie recipe that you like. And instead of eggs, use egg whites, maybe cut back on the flour a little bit so it's a little thinner. And then you spread it out on silpat on half sheet pans and bake it till crispy. And you can add like peppermint extract to some of it. You can put different kind of crushed candies or chocolate chips or whatever. So that's a really easy thing that makes, my recipe makes 2 half sheet pans and you can just cut it in little squares and you have crispy deliciousness.
So is it kind of like, I'm thinking about like almond bark? Is it kind of like a bark kind of thing? Like chocolate bark?
It's more like a really thin, crispy, think of like a Tate's chocolate chip cookie.
Oh.
Have you ever seen that brownie brittle stuff that you can get at the grocery store?
I don't buy sweet things.
You don't need to look at desserts, right? Well, so there's a brand that makes this stuff and it's very, very popular and she has tons of different flavors. And you can do the same thing. You can take one batch of the batter, split it into 4 and do 4 different flavors. All you gotta do is spread it super thin and then sprinkle on top whatever it is that you want sprinkled on top and you're done.
I love this idea. I actually do like brownies, probably because I especially if I don't make them too sweet. I like that flavor and that they're so easy. It's one of those like the kind of baking I can do. Okay. What else? What else have you got for me?
Oh goodness. Okay. Well, that was my big one. That was my big gun. But also who doesn't love cookies, And I have a couple that I feel like takes cookies to a whole nother level, starting with brown butter instead of just regular old butter. So you've got this sort of like delicious nutty toffiness kind of happening in the background. So I have a peanut butter cookie that starts with brown butter and I have an oatmeal cookie that starts with brown butter. And not only is brown butter have so much more flavor than regular butter, it's also 100% fat. Like butter is about 80% fat, plus it's got some water and some milk solids in it. So you get a cookie that has more fat in it. So it is actually chewier, makes the best texture.
Okay, but now I have so many questions. Usually, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but usually when you're making a cookie, you're creaming softened butter together with sugar. But now to make brown butter, which I have never baked with, I use it like sage pasta kind of thing, right? Sure. It's melted. It's liquid. So how does that work?
Well, you can just like stir it in melted because cookies don't rise. So you don't need like a huge like crumb structure. So you don't have to really do all that creaming. But I do sometimes like to cream it just to aerate the batter some. So you just refrigerate it until it's a solid again. I mean, now in the refrigerator, of course, it gets rock hard because it doesn't have that water in it. So you have to kind of refrigerate it for a little while, make sure it's solid, but not too solid until it's kind of like soft butter consistency. And then you can use it just like you do butter.
Oh, I love that. I love the flavor of brown butter. I'll tell you my Ukrainian baba used to brown butter to put on pierogies. And so when I taste brown butter, like it's just that kitchen, that place is just something so cozy.
It's the coziest flavor. It's like it reminds you of something that maybe you didn't even know you were missing.
Yeah.
It's like that real evocative kind of nutty, warm, and cozy. Just the best.
Love it.
Yeah.
I sometimes put it on popcorn, brown
Mm.
butter on popcorn. It's so good. Yeah, everyone. Okay. We need to make lots of brown butter and put it on popcorn, pierogies, sage pasta, and in cookies.
Use it in cookies. And, if you're not a baker, but you still want to like give cookies, there's no rule that says you can't buy regular sugar cookies from the grocery store and then ice them yourself.
That's a good
Just
idea.
make a little cream cheese frosting, use some little Christmas sprinkles, and call it a day. And then it's sort of like a semi homemade gift.
No, I like that. Can I go? I'm sorry, I'm still fixating on the brown butter. I want to go back. So no. I have one of these fixation personalities, right? So you've got me on a favorite topic. No, I want to know, okay, if I want to just take any favorite cookie recipe and do this, so say the recipe calls for, I don't know, half a cup of butter. Do I take half a cup of butter, brown it, and then put it in the fridge for a bit and soften it? Or do you start with a little bit more, or does anything change in the measuring?
Well, yes, it would change because if you're asking for a half a cup or 4 ounces of butter and 80% of that is fat, you're going to end up with 80% of 4 ounces, which is what, like 3.2 ounces, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can either, and this would require a little bit of experimentation on your part to see what texture you like better. You could either just leave it at that and do the 3.2 ounces of browned butter from your one stick of butter, ballpark anyway. You could then add in that 0.8 ounce, so like a tablespoon and a little bit of water or milk or apple juice, maybe if you're making an oatmeal cookie or something.
Oh.
So you can play with that amount of liquid that you've taken out. Or you can add some powdered milk to the butter while you're browning it, and then you end up with extra browned bits. This is like adding more milk solids. So like per stick of butter, if you add an extra teaspoon, say, of dried milk powder, then you get extra delicious browned goodness. Or you can just say, okay, well, I'm going to do this 3.2 ounces of browned butter and then add maybe a tablespoon of oil and see what it does.
Right.
Generally speaking, when you add a liquid to a cookie batter, it ends up more cakey. But since you would have had that in there anyway, you're not going to end up with a cookie that is too cakey unless you just get carried away and then add like 2 or 3 tablespoons of liquid. That would make it cakey. I'm not a cakey cookie person necessarily. I want them either chewy or crispy or gooey or fudgy or any kind of like dense kind of textures.
Right.
So anyway, so those are some ideas for experimentation. But your best bet is to, start with somebody's recipe. They've already done that work for you, and just there you go.
So I will, in the show notes, link to Jenni's Pastry Chef Online brown butter cookie recipes.
Do that.
I will. And that's where we should start. Okay. These are wonderful ideas. I'm so excited. I'm going to do the brown butter cookie for sure because I'm excited. You know me. I don't love sweets or baking as much, but I love that, like, oh, how does that work? Or like that sort of question part, which this taps into.
And that's why people want to know. Well, like, here's another thing. Somebody was asking the other day, oh, this banana bread that I made was too dry. And I was like, well, did you use butter or oil? And they're like, we use butter, and butter is more or less a solid at room temperature. Oil is a liquid at room temperature. So whatever you make with oil is going to read as more moist than, even if it doesn't have that buttery flavor to it, which is also why maybe warming up your little slice of banana bread isn't a bad idea either, because
Yeah.
you want the fat in the whatever it is that you've made to be more towards the liquid side. So the texture is softer and the mouthfeel is like voluptuous.
So would you ever do something like a banana bread using half butter and half oil so you get the richness and the liquid?
And that would be a really good time to play with some brown butter. I bet brown butter and banana bread would be amazing. Plus, it's alliterative, and who doesn't want that?
There you go. Love it. Okay. These are great ideas. Now, have you brought a surprise recipe for me? And is it related to the holiday season?
Yes, and yes.
Yay! What are you telling me about?
So I am telling you today about my husband's fruit cake.
Oh.
It's been making this fruit cake. Okay, let me preface this by saying I understand that fruit cake can be very polarizing. There are many people who do not want a fruit cake. There's the joke about there's only one fruit cake in the world that gets gifted over and over and over again. He's been making this cake for close to 20 years now. We were this back when we lived in Orlando, we were sitting on the couch. I can picture it. It was a Saturday morning. We had our coffee and we're watching Good Eats with Alton Brown. And he does this episode called Free Range Fruitcake. And we watched this episode and we're both like poo-pooing the whole fruitcake thing. And then at the end of it, he looks at me and he's like, I think I'm going to make that for Christmas this year. And I'm like, who are you? And what have you done with my husband? You don't bake. What is happening? But he did. He decided this is what I'm going to do. And he's been making these things ever since, every year. Alton Brown's recipe it's basically his recipe. Jeffrey has modified it in that he adds black pepper to it, which gives it this nice little bite kind of way at the back end. And there is more salt in his recipe than Alton Brown calls for because it really needs the salt. It's made with all dried fruit. That you macerate in golden rum. He's done that with golden rum. And if you need to do a non-alcoholic version, just get some rum extract. He uses 1 ounce of rum extract and 7 ounces of water to make the same amount. And you macerate all of this delicious dried fruit, currants and apricots and dried cherries and dried blueberries and just a whole bunch of stuff with orange zest and lemon zest. And then the batter is made on the stove. You heat up the fruit and cook it, and then it gets flour and baking soda and a bunch of different spices that Jeffrey does with a mortar and pestle, like allspice and cloves and the black pepper. He uses peppercorns and then coarse salt. And he takes all of that, puts it in a mortar and smushes it all up into dust. And then it gets some ginger, a couple of other things, cinnamon, and an egg or two, maybe a stick of butter, maybe. And Alton's recipe makes one like full 9x5 inch pan. Jeffrey uses paper, small loaf pans for gifting that are like 6x2, 2.5 inches. And it makes 4 perfectly sized for gifting little fruitcakes. And he usually starts baking end of September, beginning of October. And then you age them until it is time to give to people. If you're making the alcoholic kind, once a week or so, you spray it with brandy and then rewrap it up. If you're making non-alcoholic, you just, as soon as your loaf comes out of the oven and it's still warm, wrap it really well, keep all that moisture in there, and then just throw it in the refrigerator till you're ready to give it. But this is the best fruitcake I have ever had, which, depending on your sauce on fruitcake, is either a high bar or not, but it really is delicious. I like it especially toasted with a ton of cream cheese on it.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I actually like fruitcake in small doses, but I have a strong like taste memory. So my mom, and I hope I'm getting this right, but I think this is true, would end up with a fruitcake at Christmas, whether she made it or bought it. I don't know where it would come from. And she would keep it. And her favorite thing was to have it in the summer on a hot day. She found the like fruits like refreshing or something. So this would just be hanging out in our fridge like my entire childhood. Not the same fruitcake my entire childhood, but like
season one fruitcake.
Yeah. And you know, on some random hot July day, my mom would be like, who would like some fruitcake? So Jenni, do you want to walk us through the step-by-step of this recipe, or is it too intense and we should just go and find it online? What do you want to do with that?
I actually pulled the recipe up so I can walk you through. It's really not super hard to make. It's a lot of ingredients because it's a ton of different fruits and it's a ton of different spices, but the making of it is not hard. So I'm happy to walk through it.
Oh, good. Is it on your website as well?
It is. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Where do you start?
You start with the fruit mixture, and he macerates that anywhere from 24 hours to a week or two. It just depends on, when he has time to actually do the baking. But you start out, do you want amounts and stuff or just?
Sure.
So it's a cup of golden raisins, a cup of currants, a half a cup each of dried cranberries, dried blueberries, dried cherries, and apricots that you snip up into little pieces. So that's all the fruit. And then it gets orange zest, lemon zest, a quarter cup of minced crystallized ginger, and then a cup of golden rum or the 2 tablespoons of rum extract and 7 ounces of water. And you just shake all that up. He puts it in a big like Tupperware bin and shakes it all up. And, whenever he thinks about it, shakes it up a little bit more to make sure that everything is all smushed together. And then when you're ready to bake, you dump all of that fruit and any of the liquid that isn't absorbed yet into a pan with a cup of sugar, 1¼ sticks of butter, a cup of apple juice. He usually uses like an unfiltered apple cider. So those are the liquids. And then the spices are 4 whole cloves, 6 allspice berries, 10 peppercorns, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. Those get mixed up in the mortar and pestle, or you could do it in a spice grinder.
Mm-hmm.
And then a teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of ground ginger, and several gratings of fresh nutmeg. It also gets a teaspoon of baking soda, a teaspoon of baking powder, 2 large eggs, and you can use nuts if you want. Jeffrey doesn't normally use nuts in his, but it's a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup of pecan halves. And everything gets mixed up together, and then it goes into the pans. So it's a very easy batter to make. Once you cook the fruit with the sugar and the butter and the other liquids, you let it cool down enough because you don't want to cook the eggs when you put them in. So you let the fruit cool down for an hour or so maybe, and then stir the rest of the dry ingredients and the eggs in there, and then into the pans they go, and it bakes for about an hour, I think. Yep, about an hour. He's calling from downstairs. He says, yes, about an hour.
I love that.
He's a helper.
Is there a test for doneness? Is there any toothpick, knife?
He does a knife in the center of them, and if it comes out clean, if I were making it, I would use my instant read thermometer and shoot for about 200 degrees Fahrenheit in the center. But either way.
Is that a standard doneness for all sorts of things, 200?
Yes. I mean, I don't do it for cookies because cookies you can tell. But for cakes and breads, generally, I'm looking for between 195 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, interesting. Okay, now I have a separate question. I just got a new fandangled, the Dot, I can't remember the brand, but it's a probe thermometer that I use for roasts and things. Could you do that? Like, stick the probe and then you like take, like when you're making any kind of cake, take it out at like the exact right temperature? Is that something a person would do?
I mean, you could. Is your Dot thing the kind of thing that you stick in there and leave?
Yeah, and then you have a little like thing outside of the oven that tells you the temperature.
Oh, well, I mean, you absolutely could do that, but I just kind of spot check. I have an instant read that takes about 2 or 3 seconds to get to temperature. And I just, the probe is real thin. I just shove it in there and take the temperature. I even use it for candy making. And a lot of times people do the clip on, the big thermometers that clip on the edge of the pan. I don't love those. Partly because if you're stirring said candy, that gets in the way. So you're like always mashing your spoon into the side of the thermometer, and that's not great. And also it's taking the temperature at the edge. And you want to be able to stir really, really well to make sure that the whole mass is the same temperature before you take its temperature.
It's funny you said that. I was deep frying shrimp yesterday for a video, and I had my clip-on like candy thermometer in the pot, and the shrimp kept like spinning around it and kind of getting stuck there, and I'm like getting my tongues, and the breading came off of one of them because I was trying to get it out from around the thermometer. Literally yesterday. That's so funny.
Yeah, I used to be one of those clip on the side things because that's what my mom had. Like if you're making caramel or something, you're not supposed to stir early on, but once things start caramelizing, you can stir to make sure that everything is uniformly caramelized. And there's not enough sugar, like crystallized sugar left. It's not going to recrystallize. So you can stir, but it's just in the way. So I find that using my instant read is so much better, and yeah, like when you're getting close to done, you might have to check it pretty frequently, but it's way easier to stir.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
you can take your probe thermometer and like swish it around in the liquid to get a temperature as opposed to just like stuck in one spot too.
I like that. I like that. Okay. So then they come out of the oven when they're at temperature. Do they come out of the pan right away, rest on a rack? What is the
Well, since he makes them in little paper loaf pans for gifting, they just live in the little loaf pans.
Oh.
And he wraps them up in plastic wrap and they live in a box in our closet.
I guess I don't know what a paper loaf pan is. Is it like a
Have you ever gotten one of those Pantone things and it's like corrugated and then there's like a little decoration, like brown paper with like little squares or something? Do you know what I'm
yeah.
talking about? They look kind of like that. And there's a link to the kind that Jeffrey uses in the recipe on my site, but you can get them wherever, and like you can probably find some at the dollar store or something, just any little paper baker. Paper is safe to 451 degrees Fahrenheit, hence the book Fahrenheit 451. So if you're baking at 350, you're never going to burn that pan. So
Oh, I love that. So okay, so he cools them before he wraps them in plastic?
well, the non-alcoholic ones he wraps while they're still very warm because there's no reason to let all of that moisture evaporate out if you want a moist cake. So this is a good tip for anybody who's baking any kind of cake, fruit cake or not. I learned this tip in a very obscure, sorry to the people who wrote it, it's kind of an obscure cake decorating book, probably 25 years ago. And I poo-pooed it. I was like, that is ridiculous. You are supposed to cool your cake until it is room temperature because that's what I learned and that's what my mother taught me, blah, 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 blah. But I tried it. And oh my God, they are not wrong because if you start with a cake recipe, that recipe is balanced, right? Between dry ingredients and wet ingredients and ingredients that make things tender and ingredients that make things hold together. So it's going to be this perfect cake when it's done. Why would you take some of that liquid out of the equation? So if you wrap the cake as soon as it comes out of the pan, or if it's in a paper pan or whatever, wrap that guy up and throw it in the fridge or throw it in the freezer or just leave it on the counter. That liquid isn't going anywhere. It's going to stay in the cake and redistribute itself. And you will have a moist cake and you will wonder why you haven't been doing this all along.
I love that so much for so many reasons. I love that you're getting a great result, but I also really love the things that challenge our knowledge, that challenge like that received wisdom or the thing we've been doing our whole lives, the things that people even like, I mean, I've never been to culinary school, but people learn things in culinary school and maybe they weren't the right things. I think about like the stuff about, you have to sear meat first because that like sears the juices in. And then, or don't salt your meat way before because it draws the moisture out. Like there's all these things that I was told that I thought were true that are now being thrown out the window. And so you never know what thing you're going to read in some obscure cookbook that you're going to be like, no, that's not possible. And then it is.
And I was skeptical too. I mean, I was completely anti-wrapping a hot cake. Thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going to do this. I guess I'm going to see what's going to happen. And I was very salty about it, but I did it. And then I was like, had to eat crow, delicious, moist cake crow.
So do you do this with a lot of your cake recipes on the site now?
I do actually. And when I remember, I put it in the directions for the moistest cake, wrap that guy up. And like, if it's a bundt cake, I will remove it from the pan, make sure that there's no like sticking and weirdness, stick it back in the pan and wrap the whole thing up because the pan acts as partly a wrapper. Right. And if you try to wrap a bundt cake, it's kind of a pain because you're trying to wrap around a cooling rack and it's like way too much plastic. So this way you put it back in its pan and just cover the top of it really well.
And I guess this seems obvious, but I want to make sure if it wasn't stuck at first, like if you've unstuck it, it won't restick if it's not going back into the oven. So as long as it's been unstuck once, it can't restick.
Right. And I will let it cool though upside down so it doesn't like want to adhere to the
Hmm.
pan.
Hmm.
So it's already primed to come out.
Well, I love this. This is, I mean, of the many, many, many reasons that I love talking with you, one of them, but high up on the list, is that I always learn something fascinating. And so I am very grateful that this fruitcake turned into such a huge lesson and bit of brilliance. Thank you so much, Jenni. Can you let people know where they can find you online if they want to get more of your desserty wisdom and all of your brilliance? Where should they go?
Please come and find me, you guys. My website is pastrychefonline.com. You can find me on Facebook at Jenni Fields Pastry Chef Online. I have a fun baking group called Fearless Kitchen Fun, where we do quarterly bake-alongs. And we're going to be doing one in just a couple of weeks with some Thanksgiving recipes. And then I'm going to do like a bonus one for Christmas. But generally it's 4 times a year. So that's fun. So yeah, come find me.
Yay. Well, everybody go and find Jenni. She is the best. Thank you so much, Jenni.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you like always.
I knew you'd love hearing from Jenni. She always has such great ideas and is so knowledgeable. Definitely, if you are not already following her on Facebook, you have got to go check her out. She is really one of my favorite people that I follow on Facebook. Just really authentic, great ideas, and like, I don't know, there's just something always very like touching or funny or just real about what Jenni is posting and sharing. So definitely go and check her out. Jenni Fields, Pastry Chef Online on Facebook, and her website, pastrychefonline.com. Now, this is the part of the show where I usually tell you what I am going to be cooking and working on for the websites, so you have some idea what is coming out over the horizon, what recipes I am thinking about perfecting, that kind of thing. And I am going to be telling you nothing because I am taking a little break from the cooking over the holidays to focus on my holiday cooking and the little bit of baking that I may or may not be doing. So I have nothing to report in that area, but never fear, there are new recipes going up on the websites this week, and they are lovely for sure. That prime rib roast is going live. It is so good. If you do prime rib for your family for Christmas, you've got to check out this recipe. The idea behind it is to get a prime rib that is on the bone, but then to cut it off the bone yourself so that you can add herbs and seasonings between the bone and the meat before you tie it back up together. You can sometimes find them already tied, like the butcher has cut them like this and then tied them, but then you can't get in there without, I guess, undoing their rope, cutting their string apart, and then getting in there and tying it back up, which is totally an option. But the idea is to just get some flavor down in there, but to still have the bone, because if you do a boneless prime rib roast, then you don't have those bones to chew on. Also, the roast sits on the bones in the roasting pan, and you get a lot of nice flavor from the caramelizing bones, and it kind of protects the meat or keeps the meat cooking a little bit more slowly, which is something we really want with prime rib. So this is a reverse sear prime rib that I'm showing you how to take the bones off and season and then put the bones back on. So that's a really great idea for your wonderful festive holiday dinner. So that one is going live on Cook the Story this week. And then on the Cookful this week, I have something that might seem unusual or out of season, but there is good reason for why it is going up this week. So it is a recipe for mint jelly, which is something that is traditionally served with lamb. And lamb is not something that we think about for Christmas necessarily. But here's the thing. I have this recipe for mint sauce on the Cookful. It does exceptionally well. It gets so many people visiting it. And I noticed when I was looking at the traffic data, like I can see how many people came to different recipes on different days. And it caught my eye that the mint sauce recipe had tons of people coming to it at Thanksgiving. And I was like, oh, I guess more people are doing lamb at Thanksgiving than I realized, which made me realize that probably more people are doing lamb for Christmas than I realized as well. And so I had been working on this mint jelly recipe and decided to make sure to get it up in time for Christmas, just in case you were thinking about doing lamb and you want this really delicious jelly to serve with it. So that recipe is going live on the Cookful this week, just in time. Now, as to what I am telling you about on this podcast this week, there is a new episode every single day, 7 days a week, as always. So lots of good ideas coming your way. I am telling you about that mint jelly. Oh, I'm telling you how to make the most delicious beef gravy. I know I've mentioned this one to you before, but the actual episode all about beef gravy is coming up this week. There is a Christmas cookie recipe. I know I don't do a lot of that kind of stuff, but I do have a really great cookie recipe that I am sharing. A quick weeknight chicken drumstick recipe, and the roasted pork shoulder is this week as well. Lots of delicious food coming your way. I hope helping you to decide on what you want to make, giving you some great ideas. If you are not already subscribed to this podcast, if you're not getting these ideas every day, what are you waiting for? It's time to do it. The easiest thing to do is go on your phone to your favorite podcast app that you like to listen to podcasts on and search for Recipe of the Day there. I am just about everywhere, so you will probably find me like that. The other thing that you can do is to go to the landing page for this podcast. It's like where the hub of this podcast is. That is at cookthestory.com/ROTD. And right across the top there, you'll see it says subscribe. And then there's an Apple Podcast button, a Spotify button. So you just tap on those while you're on your phone and it'll take you right there and you can subscribe or follow. And then you will see a new episode in your podcast feed every single morning. You can also find out what I'm talking about every single day in our Facebook group. That's at facebook.com/groups/recipeotd. I post the new recipe every day in there so you can find the episode and what I'm talking about. And you can ask questions and comment on anything you've made as well. I would love to hear what you are making there too. I want to say a big thank you for listening and a big thank you to Jenni Field, pastry chef online. Check her out, y'all. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all new chicken cookbook. And from this podcast, Recipe of the Day, I hope you have a great weekend. Let's get cooking.